We are exactly 1 week away from the Pro Football Hall of Fame game between the New York Jets and the Cleveland Browns. So make sure that you're here for that, because we'll be live streaming the action right here on Jaguar Gator 9. And now, on with our feature presentation. Look, being associated with a bad football team is not fun. It's not fun to go into a season with no expectations, where your team is projected to not be very good, and where it would be a surprise if your team made the playoffs, let alone made it to the Super Bowl. That's not to say we haven't seen surprise seasons before. I'm not sure any fan of the St. Louis Rams, who were literally the worst team in the 1990s before 1999, saw their team making it to Super Bowl 34 during the 1999 season. If you had either the San Francisco 49ers or the Cincinnati Bengals, teams who were absolutely terrible around the turn of the decade, making it to Super Bowl 16 during the 1981 season, you're lying. And we were talking about Bengals head coach Zach Taylor being a candidate to be the first coach fired entering the 2021 season. Did anyone honestly have them play in Super Bowl 56 that season? Anyone? So yes, surprises can happen, which is why if you're a player going into a brand new season, it's important that you have a sense of belief. Why should I, as a fan of a team, be excited about my team's chances of winning and whatnot, and why should I spend money if the player himself doesn't believe that he can do it? And that takes us to the team that you've been watching this whole time, the 1991 Indianapolis Colts. Because entering the 1991 season, I'm not sure how many people necessarily expected them to be good enough to be a Super Bowl contender with the likes of teams like the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins. They hadn't won a playoff game since moving to Indianapolis, had only made the playoffs once in the last decade plus. Their over-under for total wins was 7.5, so they were expected to be pretty mediocre, and definitely not a Super Bowl team. And their odds of winning the Super Bowl at plus 8,000 were the 5th worst in the entire NFL, with the New York Jets, Cleveland Browns, Phoenix Cardinals, and New England Patriots being the only teams that had worse odds. Heck, their odds were so bad that the freaking Tampa Bay Buccaneers had a better chance, according to Vegas, of winning the Super Bowl. And if you know anything about the mid-80s to early 90s Bucs, you know how insane that is. But still, crazier things have happened, so you can't exactly rule out the possibility of the Colts making it to Super Bowl 26 at the start of the season. Well, if you were this man right here, you absolutely could. Because this man is quarterback Rusty Hilger, who was a member of the Colts entering the 1991 season. And it's not often that a player will have no hope whatsoever for his team to do well. Why play the game if you think you're going to stink? Why take that beating, especially if you're not necessarily getting paid a lot? What's the fun in that? But Rusty Hilger did something so ridiculous and outright said that the Colts stunk and had no shot at making it to the Super Bowl. And when you find out what it is that he did, trust me, you're not going to believe it. Not one bit. Especially since this incident may have destroyed his career and deserves a deep dive more than 30 years later. Because this is the story behind what might just be, considering all the circumstances, the stupidest quarterback, and I do not say that lightly, in the history of the Indianapolis Colts franchise. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, we need some context to understand just who this man right here, Rusty Hilger, is, and what he was doing on the Colts in the first place, as well as what was going on in his personal life that plays an important part in our story. By this point, Rusty Hilger had been in the league for quite some time, being drafted by the Los Angeles Raiders in the 6th round of the 1985 NFL Draft, meaning that entering 1991, Hilger was going to be on his 7th season in the league, God willing. Now, was Hilger a good quarterback by any means? Not so much, as you can tell from all of these lowlights, seeing as they were way easier to find than highlights, where I would really be scraping the bottom of the barrel. He started 5 games for the Raiders during the 1987 season, during which He threw 2 touchdowns and 6 interceptions while posting a passer rating of 55.8. Hilger didn't throw enough passes to qualify for passer rating, seeing as he only started 5 games. But if you took that 55.8 rating and stuck it in with the 26 other quarterbacks who did qualify, he would have the second lowest passer rating in the NFL, only ahead of Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback Mark Malone, who you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. So yeah, that's not good. In 1988, he found himself on the Detroit Lions, where he started 9 games, and oh god was he abysmal there. In those 9 games, he completed 41.2% of his passes, which was not just the worst total in the NFL that season, but was the worst total by a lot. At a time where teams were completing, on average, more than 54% of their passes, and where the top quarterbacks were somewhere in the ballpark of over 60%, here was Hilger, 13 points below that. Just to illustrate even further how bad this was, it truly was unheard of to be that inaccurate throwing the football and completing 41.2% of your passes. Here's a chart showing every single quarterback season in the post-merger era at the time. So from 1970 to 1988, from a quarterback to throw at least 300 passes. Of the hundreds of seasons you see, Hilger is in the bottom, essentially in a stratosphere all by himself, with the exception of Doug Williams in 1979 with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Hilger literally had the least accurate season by any quarterback in modern NFL history. He also threw 12 interceptions and just 7 touchdowns, and got sacked a whopping 31 times despite only starting 9 games. Over his entire career, he got sacked, on average, on 10% of his passing attempts, which is an astronomically high number. So he was not exactly the greatest quarterback in the world when it came to awareness. Still, Hilger was chugging along in the NFL, and after a stop with the Seattle Seahawks, found himself on the Indianapolis Colts entering the 1991 season, with a chance to be the team's backup behind former first overall pick Jeff George. Not a terrible gig, especially since his head coach, Ron Meyer, believed in him enough that when faced with a decision to cut either Hilger or longtime quarterback Joe Ferguson in the middle of the 1990 season, after Mark Herman came off of injured reserve, Meyer stunned a ton of people by cutting Ferguson, praising Hilger by saying, "We did it with the idea that I liked the development of Rusty Hilger a little more. I liked his arm and his ability to move. Rusty has made incredible progress." So it's clear that the Colts had faith in Hilger, for some reason, and they trusted him, and they liked what he could bring to the table. Just wait until you see how Hilger returned the favor from a trust perspective. Because entering the 1991 season, like I said, no one really expected the Colts to do anything. Having said that, crazier things had happened. The Colts, over the past few seasons, were not terrible, as you can see. They went 7-9 in 1990, 8-8 in 1989, and had 9 wins in 1988 and in 1987 during the strike-shortened season. Ron Meyer had done a pretty good job as the team's head coach, as in his 4 seasons there, plus the 3 games where he took over in 1986 as the interim and went 3-0 following an 0-13 start, he was 36-30. That's pretty good. And this was a team that was being led by Jeff George at quarterback, who was, as mentioned before, the first overall pick in the 1990 NFL Draft, and a guy that a lot of people, and understandably so, were really high on. We've seen plenty of quarterbacks make a jump from year 1 to year 2, even back then. Dan Marino made the leap from 1983 to 1984 to become the best quarterback in football. The jump that Randall Cunningham made from year 1 to year 2, especially as a passer, was remarkable. You get the idea. Even though the odds makers were not exactly high on the Colts, it was not inconceivable, especially since they had been in the thick of the playoff picture the past 4 years, that they would have a good season, and maybe go on a little bit of a run. George makes the jump, you get a weak field in terms of getting into the playoffs, especially now that 6 teams in each conference make it, and who knows? Again, crazier things have happened. And while I am in no way suggesting that fans should have bet their life savings on the Colts making it to the Super Bowl in 1991, I am saying that writing off the season entirely, especially before a game had even been played, seemed really premature. However, there was one man who decided to do that. One man decided to write the season off, thought that the Colts were going absolutely nowhere in 1991, and basically said, why bother? Screw my teammates. Because I think it goes without saying, but there are certain dates in certain professions that you need to have free on your calendar, no matter what. If you are a teacher, you can't exactly plan a vacation for the very first day of school. You'd be fired if you did that. If you are the CEO of a major company that is publicly traded and is on the stock market, you can't exactly plan a vacation for the quarterly earnings call and not show up. You get fired and voted out if you did that. If you are the dean of the university, you can't exactly plan a vacation for graduation. You kind of have to be there. You would be ousted if you did that. And if you are a football player, I think it goes without saying, but you should not, under any circumstances, plan something for Super Bowl Sunday. Obviously, I'm not talking about if your team is eliminated. If you want to go to the Caribbean or something, and you decide on that in the first week of January when your team is done playing, then do whatever you want. It's your off season, it's your life. But can you imagine the outrage if, in a hypothetical scenario, Buffalo Bills quarterback Josh Allen was looking at getting married and set his wedding date right now for February 11th, 2024, as in the date of Super Bowl 58? Well, that's exactly what this man right here, Rusty Hilger, decided to do. That's what Hilger, in all of his stupidity, decided to do. He booked a wedding with his soon-to-be wife, one of the top drag racers in the world, Lori Johns, for January 26, 1992, as in the day of Super Bowl 26. That's right. He had such little faith in his Colts making it to the Super Bowl that he decided, you know what? I'm going to book my wedding for that Sunday. I believe in my coaching staff and my teammates so little that I'm going to make plans for the Super Bowl. I'm sorry, what? You did what? Now, you might think that I'm overreacting to the issue, and I'm making a mountain out of a molehill. You might think of a few things, all of which could be understandable explanations. Maybe this was an oversight, and he had no idea what day the Super Bowl actually was. It had been the last Sunday of January for a bit now, but I could see how it might be a bit confusing, seeing as the league just recently expanded from 16 weeks to 17 weeks, and seeing as this year, there was a 1-week bye in between the conference championships and the Super Bowl, whereas during the 1990 season, there was no bye between the conference championship games and Super Bowl 25. Maybe the church or the wedding venue had a really good deal for that Sunday, knowing that not a lot of people would want to spend Super Bowl Sunday not watching the Super Bowl. So they booked it. And obviously, if the team made it, or looked like it had a chance of making it as the season drew on, they would reschedule. In essence, they booked the venue on contingency. Maybe this was the only Sunday that worked for Johns, considering her profession in the sports industry, so they would take the chance. And obviously, if the Colts look good, then they'd reconsider, and they would try something else. If any of those were the reason behind this, then maybe it was just an oversight and I'm overreacting. A stupid oversight nonetheless, but an oversight. I mean, let's be honest. We've all done something like that before, where we schedule something and then realize, oh crap, this is the same day as this event. This doesn't work for me. It happens. It's life. Granted, I'm not sure that it happens with a wedding, but it happens. So maybe I shouldn't be too harsh. Except for the fact that Lori Johns herself, I kid you not, said that the reason they picked January 26th for the wedding was because, and I quote, There was no way Indianapolis was going to be in the championship game. You're serious. You actually said that. You're serious with this. Why would you say that? I mean, seriously. How stupid do you have to be to outright say that the reason you scheduled your wedding for that date was because you knew for a fact that your team would not be playing in the Super Bowl? You not only planned the wedding on Super Bowl Sunday, but when weighing the pros and cons of picking that date, the fact that you played for the Colts was a pro? I don't even know what to say. Genuinely, I'm speechless. And this doesn't even take into account the fact that if you were to get cut or traded and sign with another team that has a better chance of making the Super Bowl, like the Buffalo Bills, then you're still screwed. And again, they didn't plan this when the Colts were 0-8 or something like this. They planned this during the offseason when everyone was 0-0 and when his roster status wasn't locked in. This idiot right here, Rusty Hilger, seriously not only planned a wedding for the Super Bowl while he was on a roster, but outright admitted that he did it because his team stunk. I mean, I don't even know what to say. I genuinely don't. Shocker, Hilger got cut and never took another step after the 1991 season. I'm not sure why he got cut. I mean, he seems like a model teammate based on this. At least he got his wedding on Super Bowl Sunday, although he didn't miss much in terms of the actual game, seeing as Washington destroyed Buffalo, in a game that you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And yes, the Colts were the worst team in football in 1991, going 1-15, and being shockingly bad and inept, so Hilger's intuition was right. But still, you don't do this. That's not the point. You just don't. So what do we learn from all this? If you are a player in the NFL and are looking at getting married, first off, congratulations on finding the love of your life. And I hope that you and your partner enjoy a fruitful marriage and are happy together and bring out the best in each other. But second off, don't plan your freaking wedding on the day of the freaking Super Bowl. It makes you look stupid. And it makes you look like you disrespect your teammates, your coaching staff, yourself, and your profession, as well as all of the fans, seeing as they believe that you're trying to win. And yet, you've got a massive conflict of interest. It also might jeopardize your roster status. But even though the Colts never outright said why they cut Hilger, this definitely could not have helped. And if you're going to plan your wedding for that day, don't be dumb enough to say that you did it because you've got no shot at making the Super Bowl. Because after that moment, I now pronounce Rusty Hilger the stupidest quarterback in Colts history. You may now kiss your career goodbye. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.